Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're going to talk art direction and how to become an art director in 2025. It's a big topic, and I don't think we're going to cover all of it today. I know we're not going to cover all of it today. There's so much we're going to dive into. So this is just the first of many episodes where I'm going to try to uncover the path to art direction without having to go to ad school for that or to pay a ton of money for a portfolio school. Schools for advertising can get really expensive, especially if you're doing a portfolio school or like a postgraduate program. There are some decent undergrad programs. I went to an undergrad program that was great, and I was able to get a job straight out of college. But there's so many situations where you might be curious about art direction and you either can't afford to go to school for it, or maybe you already went to school and you're further down your career path and you're wanting to pivot. There's just a lot of limitations, and I wish it wasn't so gate kept by these expensive schools that teach advertising, because it's really not that complicated to learn how to become an art director. It's hard. I'm not going to say it's like the easiest job, but it's really fun, and it's not that complicated of a path. And so I think I'm going to try to roadmap things out, make it seem a little simpler so that if you're doing it on your own and you're curious about becoming an art director, getting a job at an ad agency or in-house at a brand or company, that often those creative departments are modeled after ad agencies and hire from ad agencies. If you're curious about that path at all, I want to begin doing some episodes figuring out how you could do it on your own, doing it all by researching things online, and hopefully this this episode will break that down a little bit. Nice to see everyone in the chat. Wow, yeah, Fridays are so much more lively than Thursday nights. I think we're gonna keep it to Fridays. Let's talk art direction. How to become an art director. Couple thoughts that I want to share first. Art direction is not design, and I think that's a big misconception that a lot of people have, that a lot of graphic designers have as they're wanting or as they're curious and starting to explore becoming an art director. A lot of people that don't understand art direction or are, around the art direction space, whether that's like, the business people, the account people, a lot of times they confuse the art director with the designers. And so one big emphasis I want to have is that art direction is not design. And there's a nuanced conversation to have around there. And any art directors in the chat, feel free to share your thoughts on this, because I'm really curious and really trying to articulate for myself, and I've been thinking through this a lot lately on how to explain to all these people that are asking me, how do I become an art director, or I'm a designer, how do I get to the level of art director? And so that's the thing that I kind of want to lay out for you here. Before I show you some of the career paths, some of those nuances, art direction is not design, but it can encompass aspects of design. Art directors can also be designers. Some art directors are great designers. Some designers are great art directors. Some designers want to become art directors, and that path sometimes means going up and sometimes means moving side to side. It's not always a level change, or it's not always art direction is not always a position that is more senior than designer. So to really think of them as distinct things and distinct fields, I think is important. It's hard to say that they're that distinct because there's so much overlap, and aspects of design are within the world of art direction. And some of the best art directors, and often the best art directors, are amazing designers. But it's not always the case. And especially as you kind of move around the industry and explore different sides of art direction, that becomes more clear. That art direction is not design. If there's any questions on that, feel free to leave a comment or throw a comment in the chat. The reason why I mention that so much is that's like the most common question that I get. But I want to show you some of the career paths. And I picked this, I stole this from the former ECD at Adobe, Adam Morgan. He's done a bunch of great talks and workshops and seminars around the future of creative career paths and trying to think about how those career paths might be changing in a more modern world. And even these visuals that I'm going to go through here have in my mind are a little stringent. I don't love the lanes, and I don't love, it's a lot more fluid career paths can be. So even within here, there's some things that I'm hoping that someday soon, even within this Fig Jam, I'm gonna reroute some things to show some of the other possible paths, because it doesn't always look so linear like this. Nicole mentioned, yes, I think companies themselves sometimes confuse graphic designers and art directors too, and that's a huge problem, because not that either role is better, but if a graphic designer is being confused as an art director, that all of a sudden means their scope of their role completely changes. And they might be, expected and required to do things that aren't within their expertise, right? And the misconception is that art directors are better or more senior than designers, and that's not the case. But not in this graphic. This might be a little bit of a tangent. Not in this graphic is the pipeline, the workflow within a company. And art directors are often, further up the workflow from brief or strategy to execution. Designers are closer to the execution side of the workflow and the pipeline, and art directors are often closer to the idea and strategy, business side, and even closer to the client often. So, like further up the pipeline doesn't mean more senior, doesn't mean better. And I've worked with a lot of designers more senior than me because they were the specialists for that execution. Anyways, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here. So if you're a designer and you're wanting to become an art director, you can see that you may be just as senior or more senior than a lot of art directors. And the salaries don't always equal the same thing. But in terms of years of experience, you might have 5 years of experience as a designer, and you just have like that one missing piece, and we'll get into that, that will help you become an art director. In the same way, there's so many ways to get into art direction. And so just to look at the path a little bit, starting at junior art director, this is kind of the entry point for most people. Whether that's coming from internships, which would be, before that, coming from being a student, this is going to be the best entry point for most people. And then the path and I'm speaking mostly within the advertising and brand creative departments world. So this is what the path looks like. And you'll see very clearly the designer path is its own path. The art director path is another path. The art director isn't the management level. It's not senior designer to art director. There's some design studios that may have that set up where you become an art director and after senior designer, but that's not always the case. And even then, those art directors have a creative director, and so the creative director is more of the manager, and the art directors are a visual coordinator, and we'll get more into the definition. A more complicated graphic here, which is just interesting to look at, is just how creative career paths have evolved, how there's so many options out there. Even the design path is just, this is way too narrow. Like we're only talking, it's too all encompassing. Like there's UX design, there's graphic design, there's brand design, there's motion design, there's all sorts of design paths, and all of those different paths could, intertwine. And then art direction is its own thing though still. So I'll have that in the FigJam for you to look at and to reference as we're talking about some of this other stuff. But I've mentioned this FigJam a lot. If you're curious, you don't have to look at it right now. We can, go through everything that I'm going to talk through today, and then you can reference the FigJam after. But I linked it in the description. I just put it up on Gumroad, mostly so I can make sure I capture your emails first. And then if there's ever updates to the FigJam or if there's a new iteration, I can make sure you get the latest version of the FigJam. So what is an art director? Art direction, and this is going to be the key to remember. Art direction is the strategic and creative process of guiding visual and aesthetic elements of a project to communicate a specific idea, mood, or brand identity. It involves making decisions about the composition, the color, typography, photography, illustration, lighting, overall visual storytelling. So you notice there's a ton of different disciplines to create a cohesive and emotionally resonant message. Art direction is not just making things look good. It's about making things look right for the idea, the audience, and the brand. Another way to think about this, an art director is that creative role that is responsible for the visual concept. So in advertising, when you're making advertising campaigns, a brand identity, whatever kind of media project, the art director is responsible for the visual part of the concept. So an advertising art director typically works alongside a copywriter. So while the copywriter is focused on handling the verbal and the written storytelling and messaging, the art director is focused on the visual storytelling. So some key things is that conceptual element. Some of the responsibilities of an art director, concept development. So you're going to be coming up with the ideas for campaigns, brand platforms, executions, and projects. The visual storytelling, once you come up with those ideas, how does that idea come to life in a visually resonant way that matches the brief? It's online with the strategy, on brand, is interesting, achieves the problems and objectives of the brand, but they're in charge of the visuals of that. It's a very collaborative discipline. You're working with designers, photographers, illustrators, and production teams, and it's keyword collaborative because the art director isn't in charge of the designers, photographers, and illustrators and the production teams. You collaborate with them. So you're not the specialist, they're the specialist. Your specialty is concepts, is ideas, is coming up with the ideas. Then visual composition, there's things that you lead and guide, while the designer is going to bring their specialty and expertise to executing some of the work. Oftentimes, there is no designer, and the art director needs to bring things to life. If there are collaborative partners on a project, then the art director is guiding and directing how the elements are visually arranged and interact with each other, because he or she is not only thinking of the creative harmony and impact of this piece of advertising, but they're thinking about the entire campaign and how it all connects together to create like one impactful campaign that is works together strategically. Directing shoots, especially on a brand or at an advertising agency, the art director and the creative team will not be the director of the shoot, but you then become the client, and you're hiring photographers, production teams to execute the creative vision. And then I already kind of mentioned consistency, but brand consistency, the brand's tone, the identity, making sure everything aligns. There's kind of a term of like matching luggage. There's all these different pieces, but you want to make sure they all look cohesive. So those are some of the definitions of being an art director. I think something that I would probably say to like simplify it, and we can pull a thing, is the art director has two main components. There's the craft. Let's make this real big so you can actually see this. There's the craft. So you may already be a great designer. You might not be, and we'll get to that. You may be great at photography, at film, at cinematography. You may have a lot of these visual making skills. And that is one major aspect of being an art director, is the craft. But then the other big aspect is ideas. I spelled that wrong. There's a common saying that everyone can have a good idea, or good ideas can come from everywhere, which is kind of true. And there's another saying that like execution is execution is everything. Ideas, or what do people say there? Ideas can come from anyone, or ideas don't mean anything. It's all about execution. Execution is the only thing that matters. But this profession, being an art director, proves just how important ideas are. That execution doesn't matter if you're executing a dumb idea. Execution won't matter if the idea isn't good, if the idea isn't interesting. So that is usually the missing piece for most creative people that are thinking about art direction. Most of these brands, if you look at their job descriptions of the good brands and ad agencies that are looking for creatives, they'll often have keywords conceptual. They're looking for conceptual creatives. And what they're meaning is they want people who know how to come up with advertising ideas. That's a big topic, and we're going to get into that. I'm going to try to touch on ideas and what I mean by ideas, because it's not just any old idea. Some ideas are crap. Some ideas aren't good, but we'll get to that. So as an overview, we've only touched on this sort of like nuance of the nuanced discussion between art direction and design and the career paths. And it's all in the Fig Jam. That gives you a little bit of a primer, but you're here because you want to know how to become an art director. And that's what I'm going to try to do down below. I went to school to become an art director. I didn't know about advertising and ad agencies, honestly, until I got into school and happened to take an advertising class, and then found out that, oh wow, all the coolest brand films and commercials and creative things that brands do are often just done by their ad agency. The ad agency is doing it for them. So I didn't know any of that until I went to school. But if you want to learn to become an art director without going to school, this is what I think you can do to do that. And I don't have everything. This is going to be a work in progress, Fig Jam. I'm going to continue to add resources and hopefully answer questions. And then, we might need to do a follow-up session to go through some more of this more deeply. So first things first, visual craft. That's one thing that you're going to need to learn. And most people that are wondering about art direction or have been asking me about art direction on Instagram and in my DMs have some sort of visual craft skills already. So we'll touch on that briefly, but ideally, a lot of people may already have that. Then the conceptual aspect of it. That is always the big missing piece for graphic designers that want to become art directors, or oftentimes art directors who just aren't good art directors, or got into art direction because they were just good designers and are now in a role that maybe they actually don't fill very well. So the conceptual piece, that's big ideas, that's campaigns and platforms. Coming up with big ideas that can be campaigns and platforms. So we'll talk about that. Then what you're going to have to do, sorry if you can hear New York back there. you're going to want to make a portfolio. And to make a portfolio, you make spec ads. You make a portfolio full of ads and campaigns. And ads can be anything these days, like any sort of branded experience, a stunt, some sort of social media crazy thing, like anything can be an ad, but we'll get to that. You're going to want to make a portfolio of spec ads. What spec means is it comes from the word speculative. It just means it's fake. It's not real. And that sounds weird to be making a portfolio full of fake work, but it's a completely accepted thing in the creative industry. And if you're a student, that's what your program is teaching you, is how to come up with campaigns, and then you make fake campaigns. And then even agencies make spec work. Sometimes they'll make work on spec, which means they'll make it for free and it doesn't often go public. But if you're making a portfolio, don't shy away from making fake spec ads. Then you're going to make a portfolio, and I've got a whole bunch of resources here of some of my favorite portfolios and art director portfolios that I've gathered the last few years. But man, I really want to make it longer, because it's a very limited list. But it also has a bunch of schools and student archives of places you can start to dig to find other portfolios on the internet, other student portfolios on the internet, because the students, these are going to be your competition. These are the people that are getting junior art director jobs and then rising the ranks and, building creative careers as art directors. And they're doing it by just making spec ads. Braden Clark mentioned in the chat, spec ads were my lifesaver, and so fun to do. Anything is possible. It's true. That's a huge thing I should emphasize here before we even dive into it, because I don't know if we'll have time to dive too deeply into this today. Spec ads is fake. So literally anything is possible, and that's where you just make the wildest, craziest things that could be out in the world and maybe couldn't even be possible. The creative directors are going to hire creatives that really think outside the box. We'll come back to this. After you make a portfolio, you're going to then start applying to jobs. For a lot of people, that's internships, junior art director roles, especially if you're at that student level. But for a lot of designers, maybe you've been in the industry for a few years and you're now pivoting to art direction. You can probably look for standard art director roles and then work up from there. You could maybe pivot a portfolio to an art director portfolio as a senior designer and go over to senior art director pretty easily too, because the craft aspect might compensate for your lack of experience in the conceptual side of things. But then you just have to make sure your portfolio is very conceptual and showcases the ideas, not so much the design details, I guess. You want to show the design, you want to show the craft, but there's a balance there. And then speaking of pivot, I wanted to showcase, and hopefully this list gets longer, some other resources out there in case you want to find a program to do this on your own. Because there are some programs that are completely free. They're just pretty limited. So some resources, the toolbox, that's my website of all my resources. So you can always go there to find some of these links. Make ads with me. We're going to come back to that too, but it's essentially just a Facebook group that I don't know if it's very active, but it's an example of how you can find other people to work with. And that might be other writers to help you write some concepts or some messaging for your ads. There's the One School, which is specifically for Black creatives. And its mission is to get more Black creatives into the industry, and it's completely free. It's a limited enrollment, I think. So, some of these things you have to come with some sort of craft skills in order to participate in those. There's another one I need to add here is and this is the workshop. This one below here. The workshop is kind of a smaller group of creatives in the industry that have tried to make a completely free way to learn some of this, get some mentorship, and to build a portfolio. Another program that I just remembered is there's the Goodby Silverstein and Partners, GSNP. I can't remember what they're called. Their thing is called, but they have a free portfolio program, and they're an advertising agency in San Francisco. Theirs is an application process, but it's completely free, and they're just an agency that wants to give back and help people get into the industry. So a lot of these kind of programs are really trying to help creatives fill in that missing piece, which is the conceptual part of things, just understanding how campaigns work and how to come up with an idea that's big enough to be a campaign. But anyways, I'll add more to this list because I'm not the only one trying to ungatekeep the industry a little bit more, because it can be pretty expensive to try to get into it. I went to a really cheap school because it was an undergrad program, and so I was fortunate in that way. But it was 4 years, and I don't think you have to go to university to become an art director these days. Hopefully this is helpful to some people out there. And again, I'm doing this sort of on the fly and freestyling. There's so much. I thought, this morning as I started compiling a lot of this, I thought this would probably be a lot easier for me to put in, to map out. But as I started filling it in, it's a big task. So hopefully we can do another session too, and we'll continue to dive deeper. And I'm trying to also get better just articulating what this all means, and the definitions of all this kind of stuff, because it often feels just kind of mystical and magical and ambiguous. And even for creatives in the industry, even like almost 7 years now, a lot of these concepts I just know intrinsically because I've been doing it, but to try to explain it to someone else, sometimes it's pretty tough. So let's talk visual craft. Visual craft is a big part of art direction that you're going to need. It's a prerequisite, because even though you're not always the one executing, you often are the one executing some of the ads, especially early on. Most junior art directors are executing a lot of stuff, a lot of banner ads, a lot of, you could be starting on print ads, social media posts. If you can execute, if you can make the actual thing, you're going to be so much more valuable as an art director. So if you're coming from design, great. If you're coming from content creation, you may be someone who already can make videos and film and stuff. Then you've got a lot of the skills already. You may come from photography as well, and that's a huge skill in art direction. There's also, what did I write here? Cinematography, video editing, content, and social. These are all skills that art directors should learn in some ways. You don't have to be an expert in all of them, but there's probably more too. There's animation as well, which helped me become an art director that stood out in a different way, having animation and like those making video editing skills. I'd say the most important one of these craft skills in terms of being pretty universal is design. But honestly, I was a terrible designer at first. I had enough taste and I knew Photoshop well enough that I could kind of fake my way and learn as I went. But for most people, that if that's a weakness of yours, that's going to be something you need to get better at in order to become an art director. Just because so much of what we're doing involves design across the entire campaign, from social media posts to 60-second film spots. So what I was going to write over here is the reason why craft is so important is an art director's role, or one of the things art directors do the most is make decks, make a lot of pitch decks. So that doesn't sound very sexy to a lot of people, and is probably one of the reasons why a lot of designers wouldn't want to become an art director, is because an art director's job often involves sitting in a lot of pitch decks, keynotes, PowerPoints, Google Slides, and mocking up things. Because when I talked about the pipeline, you go from strategy to ideation, and then you pitch or present that to the client, and then you execute. So the pitch decks are super important in this stage of the pipeline. The design side of things is more on the execution side of the pipeline. Art direction is more on the strategy and ideation side of the pipeline and the pitching side of the pipeline. The pipeline, it's probably a lot more detailed than this, but this is just what came to mind for me right here. This is where I sit often, is working over here, is working with strategists as they brief us on what the client wants, coming up with ideas, putting those ideas into a deck, and presenting those ideas to the client. And then you're using your pitch decks, or you're using your decks for these campaigns, these campaign decks, to then brief the specialists that are executing everything, whether that's you or whether that's whether you have the fortune of hiring someone for that. So that's why visual craft is so important. It's a lot of pitch decks. It's a lot of mocking up visuals so that you can try to help the client and help either your leaders or the leaders on the client side of things understand the idea you have for this campaign. So you're mocking things up in pitch decks in order to show them, well, it could look like this. It could look like, if we're doing a stunt, you're photoshopping what this stunt could look like. We're going to put a giant sneaker in Times Square. You mock that up so that they can visually see, oh, this would actually look cool. It's a lot of mood boards. You're grabbing reference imagery online to try to help these not very creative and not very imaginative people start to imagine and catch the vision for your ideas. And what else on the craft side? And then, a lot of times you then execute or direct the execution. So you need those craft skills in order to now take everything you just presented and got sold in with a client to now execute those ideas. Or if you need or have the budget for it, you're hiring people to execute those ideas. So that's some of the craft, or those are, I guess, some of the responsibilities. I don't know. I might change that later. So this is getting a little messy over here, but that's enough on visual craft. If there's any questions, let me know. And then the last thing I really want to dive into today is the conceptual side of things, concepts, coming up with big ideas. We're not going to be able to get too much further, but this is the big piece. And I don't want to hype it up too much, but I just want to emphasize this is the part that I would be really diving into whatever materials you can find online to learn. Because, craft is something you can learn on YouTube. I think I put that here. You can learn design on YouTube. You can learn it on Skillshare. There's other resources online. And I'm going to put some other resources when I think of them for some of these other craft skills. It's something that's easy to learn. There's like so many Instagram tutorials and stuff on design now. Like the craft is going to be a lot easier. And especially, not to jump around too much, mocking up visuals is becoming so much easier now because of AI. Because, I would prefer to not use AI at all for the execution side of things, the things that actually go out into the world. But when talking to clients, when I'm just pitching and presenting, I've come up with an idea. AI helps me make that idea look somewhat real. And there's some pros and cons there. There's some limiting things with using AI, especially for mocking up, because it's going to limit the aesthetic sort of worlds that you might even be considering. But visual craft is something you can learn, but and get better at really easily. But the conceptual side of things, it's tough. It's tough to think about thinking. So some key definitions. A good idea is going to have an insight. And what an insight is, in the simplest way that I could find to define it, is it's a human truth that explains some sort of human behavior. We can go a little deeper there, but the insight is a human truth. It's like the emotional human motivation that that you might learn or find out about your customer. Then what a big idea is this rallying cry, is what a lot of people will say, that brings the brand solution to life and fuels more ideas. A big idea has a strong, or I guess here we're saying a strong insight plus a big idea is the combo that leads to iconic campaigns. Let's dive a little bit more into what an insight is. An insight in advertising is a deep human truth that explains why people think, feel, or behave a certain way. It reveals an unmet need, tension, or motivation that a brand can address in a meaningful way. An insight is deeper than an observation. And I've got some examples there. So some key traits. It's rooted in a human behavior, in human truth. It taps into emotions, psychology, or cultural truths. It's not just a fact. It goes beyond observations. It asks why something happens. It's not just, oh, people brush their teeth in the morning. It's like, why are people doing the thing that they're doing? So finding that deep, resonant human truth. It has tension. So it's tension driven. It highlights a gap, a struggle, maybe a contradiction, and it's actionable. It unlocks a powerful creative idea that the brand can own. What a big idea is in advertising is the overarching creative concept that brings a brand's message to life in a powerful, memorable, and scalable way. Keyword scalable. It's the core theme that drives a campaign, making it distinctive, emotional, and culturally relevant. Good, big ideas, great ideas come from great insights. So maybe that wasn't as clear when I was first explaining this. So the insight is the human truth. The big idea is that creative rallying cry. And when you combine an insight plus a big idea, or maybe it should say when a big idea comes from a strong insight, that will lead to a great iconic campaign. So maybe some adjusting I'll do here to articulate this a little better. I have some resources here. Every ad school has Hey Whipple, Squeeze This as, your curriculum reading. This is the reading material for advertising creatives. It'll help you understand different sizes of ideas. It'll help you understand insights better and the psychology of advertising. And this is what's going to really unlock your ability to become an art director, is the conceptual side of things. So dive into Hey Whipple, Squeeze This. Online, Luke Sullivan, who's the author of Hey Whipple, Squeeze This, he has a couple videos that I just absolutely love on big ideas and how big ideas can sometimes become brand platforms, which is a higher level than a campaign. And then he also has some videos on tension and how to find insights that are emotionally, resonant, that have that tension that people actually care about. But those are going to be some really helpful resources. I said I had some examples. So here's some examples to show you about what I mean here. So Snickers. This is one of the most classic examples that can really help you understand. So Snickers had this campaign called You're Not You When You're Hungry. If you haven't seen any of those commercials, they ran more in the early 2000s, I think. But there was like this classic Betty White one that is still one of my favorite ads. You're not you when you're hungry. The observation, which isn't an insight, but the observation was, people get irritable when they're hungry. The insight, though, it goes a little level deeper. Why do people get irritable? Hunger makes you act like someone else entirely. Hunger makes you act like someone else. And a quick snack can bring you back to normal. Oftentimes, and I don't want to make this too complicated, oftentimes the insight helps you sort of find a human truth that connects it to the brand. But I don't want to get too deep into, a human truth, a brand truth, combining them. There's a lot of layers to all of this. And even this goes deeper than I really want to get, because it's really about finding that human truth. Then what the big idea that they had is that Snickers isn't just a snack then. Like, if hunger makes you act like someone else and a quick snack can bring you back to normal, that means Snickers isn't just a snack. It's a hunger fixing personality reset. It's it's the thing that once you eat it, it'll take your personality and get you back to normal. So the way they articulated that was, you're not you and you're hungry. And the creative execution that came out of that was celebrities like Betty White acting completely unlike themselves until they eat a Snickers and return back to normal. And they pushed it to the edge of madness. This is something that Jason Bagley talks about a lot. They push it as far as they could. It wasn't just people acting like, that like they're not themselves. They literally put other famous actors in the place of these regular customers or whatever. Betty White in the commercial is playing football, which is crazy if you know Betty White, because she was so old. So that's how the idea came to life. But it all came back from that original insight that if hunger makes you act like someone else, a quick snack can bring you back to normal. And so they created the big idea, which is a sort of structured theme or an articulated way to create some sort of formula for this campaign, that in every execution that we're going to do, it's going to be all about, resetting their personality. Their personality is going to go crazy. It's going to be something else. And when you eat the Snickers, it'll bring them back to normal. A couple other examples in here are from Dove Real Beauty. The insight was, women are more beautiful than they think, but self-doubt holds them back. And so the big idea that Dove had was, Dove doesn't sell beauty products. It actually sells confidence and self-acceptance. The key word was self-acceptance. So they articulated that big idea as real beauty is about self-acceptance. And why that's a big idea. The reason why we say big is in the literal sense that the idea is big enough that it can fuel and sprout and breed tons of other mini ideas, other executions. So one of the campaigns that they did was the forensic artist experiment, where women would describe themselves more critically to this forensic expert and this forensic artist that would draw the people. So they'd be describing themselves to the artist, and the artist would draw them. And it was kind of like a more sad, pessimistic, critical view of themselves when they would look at the illustration. But when they saw how others described them, the illustrator drew a more beautiful version of them. But since then, because real beauty is such a big idea, and really is a platform level big idea, they were able to fuel a ton of other campaigns from this single big idea. A couple other examples. Spotify is a good one. I'll jump to Nike. The latest Nike campaign that they've done, Winning Isn't for Everyone, I think is just so classic and really brings them back to strong human truths that feel more intrinsic to Nike. That winning isn't just about talent, it's about mindset, sacrifice, relentless effort, and not everyone is willing to go far enough to win. So the big idea was, Nike doesn't just celebrate success, it challenges you to earn it. And this is just me figuring out how I would maybe come up with this idea. I feel like there could be a better way to even write out the insight and big idea there, because the articulation of the idea is just so strong, that winning isn't for everyone. That even like speaks to the insight itself, to the human truth itself, that that winning isn't for everyone. But it's such a strong insight that you just go straight to the idea. And from that, tons of billboards, commercial spots, everything. The big idea is that that message, that theme, that sort of structured formula that fuels the rest of the campaign. And then the executions is when you actually get to the crafting, you start making it. So I've talked a lot about the sizes, and this is probably the last thing I'll touch on. So let me know if you have any questions in the chat before we jump off and end things for the day. But we talk a lot about sizes, big ideas, because there's literal sizes to things in advertising. And I got this from there's this Droga 5 creative director that I was chatting with online, and we were going back and forth trying to figure out, what a big idea really even is, because it all gets very ambiguous. And, we really came down to the fact that like big ideas are literally big because they can sprout all these other ideas. And one thing we'll say in advertising a lot is if the idea has legs, if that big idea could have, legs like a centipede, have hundreds of mini ideas underneath it, then it's a big idea. But if the ideas you're coming up with are just, oh, what if we just put a sneaker in Times Square? Well, that's not really a big idea. That's just coming up with an execution. And that's not going to get you very far in art direction. You really want to be coming up with ideas that can kind of fuel the campaigns and hopefully even the platforms that are above campaigns. So it can start from way up here in the idea territory that I don't even ever touch, the business strategy, positioning, branding. A lot of that is already set in stone, already decided. Some creative people will work with companies at that level, but that's not what a lot of art directors touch. But the big idea is that can become a platform. What a platform is it's just one level higher than a campaign, where all it really is a single message, a single line. If it's a customer facing line, it sounds like, their tagline, but it's not like, just do it was such a big idea for Nike that it is part of their branding and positioning of the entire company. So it's larger than a platform. Big ideas. There's some more things up here from Luke Sullivan on what constitutes a big idea, or what constitutes a platform and a big idea. But it only qualifies as a platform if it fits on a Post-it note. It's got to be like super succinct. And if it's an idea that can fit on a Post-it note and sprout a ton of ideas, like he says here, the other sign that it's a platform is it starts talking and won't shut up. As soon as we say the idea winning isn't for everyone, you can start to think of all the executions that we could make to try to showcase to customers and to celebrate the fact that winning, winning isn't for everyone. Winning, requires you doing the hard things, being mean, not being likable, all these different things. You could create series of videos, you could make print ads, all these sorts of things. As soon as if you have an idea that just, gets everyone's brains going, and all of a sudden no one can stop thinking about all the social posts, all the videos, all the animations that we could make with this big idea, then you've got, something that's campaign worthy or platform worthy. World building is another key qualifier of a platform, popularized at science fiction writers' workshops in the 50s, is a fantastic metaphor for creating brand platforms. Essentially, like you kind of start to build a world around this single idea. How to create brand worlds and platforms, big ideas. You need that human truth. And then something Luke Sullivan teaches a lot is adding in conflict. If your idea, maybe goes against the grain, find some sort of tension to say something counterintuitive about that human truth, then you're going to have a message that could really resonate with people and be executed in a lot of different ways. So that's big ideas. And I want to stop there in case anyone has questions about coming up with big ideas. Feel free to leave them in the chat. Feel free to put them in the comments. But if you want to become an art director, check out the Fig Jam. All of the resources I can find. And in the future, as I find more resources, I'm going to try to put them in here. We'll do some more sessions on this path to how to become an art director and maybe repeat some of this stuff. But the first thing is understanding how to come up with ideas for advertising campaigns that have big ideas that are rooted in a human truth. So dig into this material, dig into, hey, Whipple squeeze this. There's some other stuff that I'll throw in here too. Jason Bagley has a great article that I'm going to throw in about coming up with ideas without overthinking them. I've made a video on that as well. So that's another resource I'm going to add. But then once you have ideas, if you're like, oh, what if it'd be cool for, this brand to do a cool thing or this brand to do a cool thing, then it's time to start making spec ads. And this is what we'll have to dive more into in another session, because there's a lot of resources that you could start to search for. And I'm going to start to try to gather in here about some tips and advice on how to make spec ads. I think stuff about advertising, Ashley, if you look up her YouTube channel, she might have some YouTube videos about making spec ads. There's advice like, don't pick the biggest brand. Don't make spec ads for Apple, because you're never going to make fake ads that are better than the real ads. And the key here with making fake ads and making a portfolio that will get you hired is making it look like it could be a real campaign and maybe even cooler and better than what's actually being made by those brands. Because you're a student or someone making this on spec, you're making a spec ad, you don't have the limitations of budget. You can use any sort of tools at your disposal. You don't have the limitations of a legal department. You can be as provocative as you want to be. You can be as crazy as you want to be. You could take Kraft Heinz into a world they've never been. And Kraft Heinz might be on the verge of that kind of brand that I maybe wouldn't make spec ads for, because they already make some of the best advertising work in the industry. Yeah, that's where I'll end it today. Is start figuring out the conceptual side of things, start coming up with ideas, and then start putting a portfolio together. And that's just going to be a website. Use Squarespace, use Wix, use whatever's easy, and mocking up your own stuff and putting things together to fake becoming an art director. We have a question in the chat as well. Do you think it's worth it for recent graduates to be entering competitions like D&AD, New Blood, or is it better to stick straight to spec work with more freedom? That's a great question. I think if you're in school or still kind of in the school territory, it's totally worth doing. Like if you have the time, if you're still, able to live with your parents, or if you're able to like put in the time to enter those award shows, I think for a lot of ad agencies, creative directors will see sometimes those awards in your portfolio, and that can be helpful. But it's not necessary. And if it takes too much energy, maybe stick to just spec work that gives you the freedom to make something just insane and something, crafted to the craziest extent that you can. So yeah, it's a great question. Yes and no. I put a bunch of portfolio examples in here and also linked to some of the student award show archives, and I'll put even more in hopefully soon, so you can kind of see. But like you're saying, it can be limiting sticking to the briefs that those portfolio or those student award shows provide. But also a lot of these student award shows have like open categories where you can enter your spec work as just an open campaign idea and get awards for those ideas. So that helped me a lot. A lot of my fellow classmates, we made things for the briefs, but also just entered all of our spec work, and we're able to add little award badges to the work that we made, just to show, communicate quickly these ideas. Other people think they're cool, so hopefully you think they're cool too. Another question: would you be open to doing portfolio reviews? Love your videos. Oh, appreciate that. I definitely am open to doing portfolio reviews. I'd want to probably do them in a sort of live format like this, so that hopefully it can be beneficial to a lot of people. I've been starting, especially this last week since I quit my job, my emails are just too hard to stay on top of, for helping people that can't benefit me career wise. And so I'm trying to be as helpful as possible, and as beneficial as possible to people that are, trying to make their way through the industry. But at the same time, having just quit my job, I'm being so selective with my time, because any free time goes straight to my son. And that's why I quit my job, was so I could have more time with my family. So these formats, yeah, I think it'd probably be worthwhile doing a portfolio review where we just churn through a bunch of portfolios. And if I had time, I was going to show you some of these portfolios. You should definitely click some of these links here to see some really awesome portfolios. Braden, who's in the chat, might remember Josh King, one of the Wyden and Kennedy recruiters in London, when we were touring around agencies in London, showed us this portfolio, and it's the craziest portfolio ever. And she told us the only reason, let's just open it up, the only reason why she hired him, and maybe not the only, but she was like, I hired him because of this down here, a conker, which I didn't even know it was a thing. It's a nut, a conker that looks like ET. And he put that in his book, or in his website, in his portfolio, as a project, right alongside all of his wacky ads and things. So he is further along and has produced commercials and things, so you don't have to be looking at, making videos and commercials in your spec work, unless you have some people you can collaborate with to do that. But yeah, pretty crazy. Abby, thank you for offering this for free. I appreciate it. You're so welcome. Hopefully, yeah, you get a chance to dive in more, and hopefully we do another session. This is definitely very freestyled, and I'll get better at making this easier as we keep doing it. Any last questions? Feel free to leave them in. This has been fun. It started a little rocky with my technical difficulties. Hopefully we didn't lose too many people. Yeah, a lot of learnings along the way. Even the fact that I say so much is something that you just start to improve on, and you get better at the more you do these things. So I'm trying to commit to doing it every Friday at 2 p.m. So come back then if you want to be a part of these live. And then the replays, I try to get them posted on Spotify and YouTube by Monday or Monday morning-ish. So hopefully that's there for when you're starting the work week again. And if you want to listen or watch on your subway ride into the city, or listen while you're driving to work, you can. And yeah, any last questions? Next week, we'll either keep going along this road, or I've got a plan to bring on an art director friend, and we're going to talk about what you could put in your portfolio. So we talked about spec ads, but we're going to talk about passion projects as well, which I think could be really interesting to talk about, because I have a lot of opinions on portfolios, and so often designer portfolios that are trying to become art directors don't have enough of the ideas, aren't crazy enough or interesting enough or wild enough in those ways. But even if you're a designer and you're wanting to stay as a designer, I think you could benefit from some of these portfolio tips in not getting so bogged down into the weeds of these brochures and business cards and things like that, and trying to push things into a space that would actually surprise people. So we're going to talk portfolios next week, and passion projects, because you can put anything in your portfolio. Spec ads is going to be the big thing. But those spec ads could be as wacky as you want them to be. And then you can also put other things in your portfolio. And it's just about packaging things in a way that it makes each piece of your portfolio look like a distinct project, so that people that are looking through your portfolio can see that there is a big idea that is fueling everything in that project. So we'll get more into that. I think that's it. I'm just wanting to hesitate a little bit before we jump, just so I don't miss anything. In case there's anything that I was going to cover. There's a bunch of ad agencies here. I literally just chat GPT'd what are the biggest and best ad agencies, and it got a lot of the famous ones that I know of, but there's a whole bunch, especially like smaller independent agencies that do really amazing, even famous work that aren't on this list. But this is just to get people started. If you are looking to pivot into advertising, you know nothing about advertising, or if you're in a world where you don't know anything about advertising. Another comment, looking forward to more portfolio tips. I'm a designer wanting to be an art director and definitely relate to getting too specific on design and losing sight of the big idea. Yeah, it can be tough. And again, it's that whole nuanced conversation of design is not art direction, and design and art direction is not better than design. And there's probably so many other resources out there to make great designer portfolios that really dive into the craft, that really show your thinking and your thought process behind how you executed a thing. And I want to emphasize that is a career and a role that you can have hugely, hugely successful careers in, is being a designer, leveling up to senior designer, becoming a design director, or becoming an independent designer consultant. People that are specialists in executing these pieces of a business. But it's not art direction. It's just a different lane. Another question, would you recommend spec work for already working / mid-level art directors, or just personal projects in addition to work we've already done? I definitely recommend it. And it depends on your goals. If you're feeling like you're not at the level you want to be, or you're not getting hired at the agencies you want to be getting hired at, or the only opportunities that you're getting to make work is work that you don't love, then you should make some spec work. Or I still have a spec piece in my portfolio. It's a commercial we made in school, and I was so proud of it. Me and a whole bunch of other creatives, we all worked together on it, that I still have it in my portfolio. And I was an ACD senior level art director at Amazon. So it's going to be super beneficial for you to make spec work if you really want to, position your portfolio in a different way. Maybe you're not making enough funny work and you want to make more funny work, then make some funny spec ads. And no creative director is ever going to look down on that. They're just going to see the craft that you put into it and be impressed by the craft, and also, hopefully be surprised by your ideas and be impressed by your ability to come up with good ideas. So that's a great question. Definitely check out all these ad agencies in the FigJam. Another resource I wanted to add for people, if you're further along in your career, whether you're a designer or an art director and you're wanting to level up. I actually spent the last 8 weeks in one of Jason Bagley's classes, Creative Mega Machine. And Jason Bagley was a former ECD at Wieden & Kennedy, responsible for a lot of the Old Spice and some Nike work as well. He's done a lot of famous stuff. And he is now teaching, giving back a lot, and teaching all of his secrets to becoming a really great creative in his school. It's not for everyone. It's also something that you could probably try to get your agency or your company to pay for from your education and development budget, because it's not cheap, but it was super worthwhile, because it just kind of, he just laid it out so simply. This is how to make great creative work and made sure I understood, what I needed to focus on. It's like there's so much advice and things out there, and just hearing from a great creative that, okay, just focus on this, just do this, just focus on the work here, or just do this piece and this piece and this piece, gave me a lot of clarity, I'd say. So that is super beneficial. I would recommend for more people that are already in the ad agency world or advertising world and are wanting to level up. And that's it. Again, thanks so much for joining. Let's end things. Tune in next time, Friday, 2 p.m. on the live stream. Watch the replays on YouTube and Spotify. This has been way more of a pleasure than I thought it would be after going live on the wrong links and having to restart links and all that stuff. But thank you for joining, and I'll see you guys all next time.